So I'll just do a
It
few
should
announcements.
be Lieutenant Cunningham. He did confirm, so maybe
Okay, oh, I see Anthony
I see
Cunningham
him.
on here.
Yes,
Oh, great. Thank
that
you.
is the Zone 5.
Welcome. You're on mute, but you feel free to unmute and
There we go.
give us what you got.
Sorry, I'm still on the Atari phase of computers, so I'll catch up one of these days.
Here you go.
All right, welcome. So thanks for inviting me, and so a couple updates. I think we briefed last time that we're gonna be moving towards some new models and some more new staffing within the Pittsburgh Bureau of Police. Starting on the 26th of the month, we're going to be working more towards some more neighborhood related officers. And we're going to see a change in our patrol strategies and our patrol times. And every group of neighborhoods is going to have a couple of officers assigned just to that neighborhood. So we're getting back more towards the neighborhood and community oriented police officers. We have a couple of dashboards that are up and running now. We're still working on one, on the crime mapping one. But what I can do is tomorrow I can scan and email the link up to you guys and you can hand it out. And it's got a QR code on it and you can go on and check. Because it's computers, I call it almost real-time updates with checking to see what's happening, not only in your neighborhoods, but in the surrounding neighborhoods coming up. So those are some of the big ones that big issues that we've got going on. Um, just looking forward to working with everybody and seeing what the new year is going to bring. What type of questions do you guys have for us?
Typically, we get an update on recent crimes since the past month, so sort of a brief update.
Sure. So unfortunately, we've just transitioned over with this RMS reporting system, and we're still working out a few glitches. So I don't have those at this moment. I was working with them today, and my computer was not cooperating. But I can, as soon as I get them tomorrow, hopefully Monday at the latest, I can push them out to the email, and we can get them put out.
Officer, can you give a little bit more concrete picture of what the neighborhood policing might look like?
Sure. So one of the things that we're doing is, again, we're moving more towards a sector system where we're going to have uh, 1 to 2 cars assigned to each sector. Each sector is going to have about 3 neighborhoods. So they're going to be working, and the main patrol times that we're going to have, that we're going to see people out of the cars, are the AM and the PM, and that's going to run from 7 in the morning till about 2:30 in the morning. So what's going to happen is we're going to try to get away from a reactive police department more into a proactive police department. And by assigning these cars back to the sectors, they're going to be able to spend more time in the neighborhoods to where they're going to get to know the people that live there, the cars that belong on the streets, the businesses that are open during this time and not this time, and be able to start making more of that connection back to the way we used to have it. The main goal is for us to be able to get out of our cars and spend more time in the community and less time in our cars chasing calls. Now, one of the things that's going to be coming into play is a program called Verified Alarm. And what's going to happen is for people who have alarms, alarm systems, home, business, things like that, you're going to see a difference in the way that we respond. First and foremost, we are always going to respond to any type of push button panic alarm, anything like that. So if there's an alarm, whether you have it on a keypad in your house, on a little clicker on your keys, anything like that, something like that, we're going to respond. But with verified response is you leave and like we get a night like tonight and the winds are blowing and it rattles a door. The responsibility is going to be on the alarm company, ADT, Guardian, Vector, all the good companies, to actually be able to verify that that is an alarm and not just the wind blowing, or you have a motion alarm and the dog or cat was out running around the house. So they're going to use the other things that they have to verify that it's alarm. So last year, over all of the alarms that we went to and all of the verified things, we made 4 arrests for actual burglaries, where we actually caught somebody in the process. Now, we cleared a whole lot of alarms through investigation and all that other good stuff, but actually having somebody found on the premises, we had 4 throughout the city, throughout the entire year. Every time there was an alarm that went off, and the vast majority of them, probably 90-some%, were false alarms because of a door shaking. You went out, you just didn't get out fast enough, and then the alarm went off, something like that. We were sending at least 2 cars, and that was at least 20 to 30 minutes per officer per call. We're looking at, through this verified alarm, being able to take that time, reclaim it to have the officers actually in the community and back in the neighborhoods. So if that's all that works, we're going to have all those hours back where the officers are actually getting out, meeting the neighbors, seeing what's going on in the neighborhood and going through. So we expect that you're going to see. And then once when we have the meetings moving forward, and once we have the officers assigned to each sector, along with myself and the CROs, Nikki and Jeff and everybody, we're going to bring the officers up with us to the meetings, because they're the ones that you guys are going to get to meet and you're going to see right around. They're going to be in there. So then they're going to be able to have a little bit more FaceTime and get to hear concerns of the neighborhoods, concerns of the citizens, and be able to respond directly to those. So we're trying to go more to a proactive than a reactive.
Thank you so much.
Officer, I was a little bit late signing on.
Sure.
But you said that there would be 2 cars assigned to 3 neighborhoods. What are the other 2 neighborhoods along with Highland Park?
I believe it is Stanton Heights and Morningside. I will have to double check. But what we tried to do is we tried to pick all the neighborhoods that connect. So we wouldn't have somebody from Highland Park also responsible for Lincoln Larimer or East Hills. We want to try to keep everybody in a geographic area so that that sector would go through. Now, the sector car that would be up with you guys, they're also going to be responsible for across the bridge and dealing with Waterworks Mall. So there's a little bit of a distance to go to get there, but the amount of calls that we have in there, it doesn't take up that much of the time.
Okay, thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Can I ask more about the proposed changes to, or the changes coming to responding to alarms?
Sure.
How many overall response, like alarms overall do you typically get?
So over last year, I think we were just over 10,000 calls for alarms.
Wow.
Right.
Okay.
So when you break that down to 20 to 30 minutes per officer with having at least 2 officers out, that's a lot of hours that were spent responding to calls that were ultimately false alarms.
Well, that was my other question. So you said you only had 4 arrests, but I wonder what the actual false alarm rate was. So just because someone wasn't there when you arrived doesn't mean that there wasn't somebody there who was scared away by the idea of the police responding to an alarm. And if it turns out that the police are not going to respond, or that there's a delay in response by 5 to 10 minutes while verification happens, would we see, I mean, I guess, yeah, I mean, what will the delay be for verification? And I wonder if you could be more clear about what were false alarms out of that 10,000.
Sure. I don't have the actual number of false alarms handy. I can get that and we can have those provided. The delay is one that the delay is going to be on the alarm company. And a lot of the alarm companies right now are doing this. This is happening in probably about 85. This verified response is happening in about just under 85% of the departments across the country. So this is one that all of the major alarm companies are very used to doing. And it's something that, quite honestly, they're doing right now simultaneously, but they're not doing it for the residents of the city of Pittsburgh. They're doing it for other residents where they're monitoring everything, checking and doing what the residents are paying for their alarm companies. what they're paying them to do, they're spending more time not servicing the residents of Pittsburgh and more time spent with the residents outside of Pittsburgh. When the alarm comes in, it automatically starts pulling up any other technology that you might have associated with your alarm and another way to verify it. As it goes right now, while they're dispatching us, they're still doing things like attempting to contact the key holder, and they're making phone calls. And there's a list of things that we're going to respond if there's what we look for is we look for a secondary indicator. So the alarm goes off for the front door. 15, 20 seconds later, there's an alarm that goes off for a motion detector. ADT is automatically sending us EOCs dispatching the cars to go. What they're looking for in stuff that might slow down a response is you have a glass break, a motion detector, and sensors on all the doors. You get one of the sensors on a door goes off, but none of the other alarms go off. That's one that they're going to then try to get a hold of the key holder, the resident, prior to dispatching us. So there's not going to be a delay when there's this secondary indicator. Because if there's a secondary indicator, they're sending us just like it happens right now. So the only time that there's going to be any type of delay, and the delay we might be talking on our side, it's going to be the same as right now. As soon as the dispatch comes in, we're getting it put out. Any delay that would happen would be on the side of the alarm company. If ADT or Verizon or Vector or Guardian or whoever decides to sit on it and wait for something else, then that would be a delay that we can't handle until we find out that those delays are happening. Then we can work with those companies to say, hey, look, we need to know sooner than this.
Is there a plan? I'm just wondering about people that don't have, I mean, in my experience as a homeowner having an alarm system, I always get called before the dispatch happens already. Like that's been my experience the last 10 years.
Right.
So it sounds like what you're saying is that's not going to change. They would call me. If they can't get a hold of me, they would forward it to you.
Correct. Right. Yeah. Those types of things are not going to change because maybe one of their secondary indicators is we attempted the key holder and the alternate. We're not able to get a hold of anyone.
Right.
So
That's my understanding is they're typical. That's their, I believe for ADT at least, which is the only one I've experienced, that is their policy and has been for as long as I've been a
right
customer. So
right.
okay. So it sounds like what's going to change is maybe other companies that don't do verification that are just sending you stuff immediately.
Possibly. And right now there are some companies that if they get a hold of you and you say, oh yeah, you know what, I just pulled out of my driveway, everything's fine. I guess I didn't, close the door fast enough. There's other companies that still dispatch us.
Oh.
And knowing that you're in your car driving away, heading to work or wherever you're going, knowing that there's not a problem and that they spoke with the homeowner and everything's good, they still dispatch us so that they can have a stat of we dispatch 100% of our calls. And those are the ones that we're trying to get rid of.
I understand. Thank you for providing. I would still be interested to know how many of the calls ended up being false alarms out of those 10,000. But I appreciate the further explanation. Thank you.
No worries. And Commander Mercuro has those. He's in training right now, but he has those because he was on the research board that looked at it before we went to this, so I can get that information from him.
Great, thanks.
Any other questions?
And one last thing for, I think you had somebody else on there, but we are hiring if anybody's interested. If you want to be an officer and you want to come to these meetings, come on down and see us. We're always hiring.
Thanks so much for joining us. I'll put in one plug. I know this isn't zone 5, but the firing range, they've been going crazy. They've been going late, well after 5 o'clock in the afternoon, which is when they say that no one's over there, but it's really obvious when they're over there. So I encourage everyone to dial 311 when that happens, just to get it documented.
Have they updated their schedule for you? Because I know we
No, I
have,
haven't gotten a schedule in a long time.
okay, I'll check with that because I know we have an academy class. We actually have 2 academy classes that are in right now. We have 1 academy class that's due to start their field training and go out on the streets in the middle of March. So,
I want to correct that because Stephanie, you
No.
weren't here. They provided a live calendar for us, and we
Okay.
do have a live ongoing. If anybody doesn't have access to that, I'll dig the link out and share it. But you can subscribe to the Google Calendar and actually have in your own calendar everything. I will say that the only thing on that calendar for the rest of February is February 20th, and the next thing after that is March 5th. So that
Okay.
would imply to me that we shouldn't hear any gunfire except on the 20th for the rest of the month. And if that's not the reality, then I see events going through on this calendar scheduled through May, it looks like. So there are events on here, but it's definitely not daily. Although there are some weeks where there's multiple days during the week, but there's more off than on listed here at the moment.
okay, I could check with Firearms to see if they can make sure that they're updating the correct calendar. That's the one that's been shared and going out live. Not that they're putting it on a dead link or on a different calendar that's not being shared. So I could check with them.
Thank you.
Great. Thank you both for that update. All right, if there are no other questions, we'll let you get back to work. We appreciate you coming, and it's interesting to hear about the updates that are going on.
Thanks.
All right. I just have a couple of HPCC updates. Just first up, a reminder, the SOS program, Senior Online Services. Judy, do you want to give a quick plug?
We're up and running. We're looking for more funding. We're trying to find some more grant funding. The HPCC has stepped up and is providing us with some funding, and so did the city. Everything we've done so far has been positive. There has not been one complaint about the program at all. So I would encourage everybody in Highland Park who's 55 and older and who needs any kind of help to give us a call. So.
And what's the email address or the phone number? You know, or can we put them in the chat?
I do know them, but I'm not there right. But I'll send them out. Okay.
Okay. Great. Thank you,
in
Judy.
North Carolina. Sorry.
That's okay. I bet Serena would probably be on it because she tends to be more adept at those things.
I'll pull that after the calendar link. I'm trying to
Thank you. I also want to thank all of our new and renewing members. You should have gotten a postcard last month with some fun pictures from last year of HPCC events and goings on. It's always fun to provide that update and sort of look back at everything that we get to do with you all in the community. And it's our annual membership drive. You sort of renew whenever you need to renew, but that's sort of our reminder. A lot of folks are sort of on the calendar cycle. So thank you to everyone who has done that. If you haven't, please do so. You can either send it in the postcard with a check, or you can go to our website and there's a link to give securely online. I also want to let people know that we are going to be recruiting new board members and volunteers. We'll have some more specifics about what we're looking for coming up in the spring. But, you know, we need people with all sorts of skills and interests, whether it's like writing for our blog or helping with our website, or if there are particular events that you really love and want to get more involved in, like all the big ones are returning, the yard sale and the Bryant Street Festival and the Hullabaloo. We have some new things on the horizon. We're starting to look into doing a community plan. We're also looking to do some more with our the schools in the neighborhood and on the edges of the neighborhood. If you're really interested in things like city services, PWSA, Parks Conservancy and the parks, the zoo, the parklet, the Bryant Street businesses, like we have so many things going on, and but we can only do it when we have people that are really interested and can step forward and be a part. So feel free to reach out and just pay attention, because we definitely will be putting out a call for some specific skills as well. And lastly, before we launch to our speakers, We are going to be hosting a meeting 2 weeks from tonight. So it's an off week for us. We don't usually have meetings. Then it's a leap year, special leap year event. And it is a meeting where we're inviting the Highland Park Community Development Corporation to come. They have a project that's going before the zoning board in March. It's on Mellon Street. I don't know the number offhand, or I can find it quickly. It is the Schweibel House. So it's a historically significant house. As an architect, if you're not familiar with, is an architect who's done a lot of famous houses here in Pittsburgh. It's from the outside, it looks pretty much like it's falling down. It's all sort of blue peeling paint on the stucco. But inside it's got some really lovely historic architecture that they want to save, but they also are requesting some zoning changes, and we want to give the community a chance to hear about those and respond to those. And we haven't heard from them at any of our meetings in a while, so we're going to give them a chance to update us on their portfolio and their projects. So we'll be posting the link to that in the next week or so. But while you're here, just mark it on your calendars. 2 weeks from tonight, we'll be at 7 o'clock on Zoom. So with that, I'm going to hand it off to our guests, Rebecca Zito and Amora McLaughlin from PWSA, providing updates on some of the projects here. And I'm guessing I need to let you share your screens.
It looks like I'm able to share, Stephanie, so let me
good.
try.
Sabrina probably set you up. No, okay.
It is disabled. Sorry, I have the button, but it told me no.
Okay. All right. Oh.
Okay, great. Thank you.
Yeah, absolutely.
Great. So we have a fairly brief but a two-part presentation for you all tonight. Thank you all for coming. Thank you for having us. My name is Maura McLaughlin. I'm the Construction Communications Project Manager at PWSA. And tonight we also have with us, as Stephanie mentioned, Rebecca Zito, who's the Manager of Public Affairs. We also have some people from our engineering department. We have Barry King, who's our Director of Engineering, and Mario Camerata, who is a project manager on the pump station project. So the two parts of this presentation tonight are going to be updates on the pump station. We're calling phase 2 of that project. You all saw phase 1, the large diameter pipes that were installed along Mellon Terrace, Bunker Hill, and up into the park. So we're going to give you updates on phase 2. And Rebecca is going to take over in the middle there to give some updates on the microfiltration plant, which is kind of adjacent to the uncovered reservoir. So with that being said, I'm going to get in. Everybody can see, correct?
Yes.
Okay, great. One moment, sorry. Okay, there we are. So as I mentioned, these two initiatives are what we're going to focus on today. You all recognize this pump station. This is the existing pump station, which will eventually be demolished as part of this work. But before we dig in, I just want to remind everybody, you've seen this before if you come to these meetings and you've seen me present. This project, certainly the phase 1 of this project was part of the water reliability plan. This phase 2 will also help with reliability and resiliency in our system. It's a series of once-in-a-generation projects, very large scale. Like I mentioned, they're going to strengthen and add redundancy to our water system, meaning less outages, less chance for people to be out of water for extended periods, things like that. It is a series of projects. We're also upgrading some other pump stations in the system. We did some work to the covered reservoir in Highland Park, but this is all leading up to restoration of our clear well, essentially a replacement of it. You can see on the map there, the clear well sits essentially in Aspinwall Borough, although it's technically City of Pittsburgh property over there. It's one of the major treatment process steps where we chlorinate the water to make sure we kill any bacteria and microbiomes in the water. That needs to be replaced. So all of these projects that we're working on throughout the system are going to allow us to take that clear well offline, renew it, and put it back online. So we'll have some of our largest pieces of infrastructure renewed for what is essentially the next 100 years. A lot of this is part of a state consent order, so we are being mandated to do this, but it is time to do it anyways. And this is going to be a $470 million investment over the course of about 5 years. So as you've seen, I mentioned this before, phase 1 of this work was to install some of the large diameter pipes that are eventually going to connect to this new pump station. These are what we call rising mains, very large diameter pipes. The green arrow here is kind of the path of that new pipe. If you live in the neighborhood, you would have seen this work happening. But what we're going to talk about a little more today are these 2 areas kind of near reservoir number 2. That red square is the existing pump station, or what we're calling now the former pump station. And that green circle is the footprint of what we're going to be constructing, which is a much more modern, much more flexible new pump station that's going to allow us to be able to control the movement of water better in our system. This is a rendering of that new station. You can see kind of off to the right in this rendering is just kind of a representation of the covered reservoir. But this is generally what the new building is going to look like. Like I said, it's behind the footprint of the existing pump station. It's kind of hard to see from the street, but you can see we I guess moved some buildings, some temporary buildings back there for our construction workers, and you've probably been seeing some trucks go back and forth there. We are going to eventually, towards the end of the project, demolish the old pump station. We replaced the original supply mains that carry water from the covered reservoir to the pump station, and we installed those new rising mains. So we're getting close to being able to connect everything together. We just need this new station. This is a $50 million investment in the water system. So there's a lot happening in Highland Park and has been for a while. This is one of the highest points in our system in terms of elevation. We have a gravity-fed system, so Highland Park is very important to the health and the resiliency of the entire city's water system. So we really appreciate everyone's patience and understanding as we do these upgrades. It's very large dollar amounts, and it is very important for the future of the city. So some of the construction impacts, you have been seeing probably truck traffic move to and from that area at Mellon Terrace in North Negley. It is a regular project schedule, the way the city permits most construction projects around the city, Monday through Friday, 7 a.m. to 5 p.m. We're not going to be impacting water service with this work. People's water service will be maintained. And most of the work will be behind that facility. Obviously, there are some residents living on North Negley who are very close to the work. As we start to do more work back there, my plan is to have kind of a site walk with those residents. If any people on this call tonight are living in that area adjacent to our work, I'd love to just collect your information. Either way, I'm going to be sending out some communications to your home. But for the most part, it won't be in the street, or not for the most part, it will be behind the building. It won't be in the street like phase 1 was, where we were doing detours, rerouting traffic around the neighborhood. It's all pretty contained. And this is just a general phasing and timeline here. We awarded the contract. It's a rather large contract. There's a general contractor, and then there's other contracts below it with more specialties like HVAC, electrical, things like that. That was awarded in October because it is such a large contract. The phasing in of the contractors, permitting, documentation took a little while, but we did start moving things on site in February, a few weeks ago. And this is going to be a fairly long project, considering we're building a new facility, demolishing an old one. We anticipate that we'll be complete around mid-2026, entirely, everything connected, working, totally complete. And this is general phasing. I will preface this by saying, we just got started. As you know, with construction, things are subject to change as we begin this work, but this is generally the phasing. The new pump station construction, we hope, will be around the end of 2025. The process phase will start in early 2026. tying into the already completed work that we did around this new pump station will be in early 2026. And then we'll be demolishing and decommissioning this building here that you see right around mid-year. So obviously, as we continue this work, you know, things are shifted, changed in terms of timeline. We can certainly come back, give you progress updates at this meeting to let you know how things are going. I'll continue to keep updates on our project page. This is the same page that I used for phase 1. Phase 2 project updates are going to be available here. And so everybody's aware of this. This is such a momentous project. As we get to some of the more critical first steps of building the building itself, we do plan to host some type of media event to commemorate the start of that in the coming months. So we'll share more information as it comes on that. I think that what we're going to do, we only have about this many slides left for the second part of this presentation that Rebecca is going to take over. So if you could please hold any questions for the end. We just want to get through our information and then we can start answering some questions. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to Rebecca, who's going to talk to you about the microfiltration plant on the other side of the park.
Thanks, Maura. Well, good evening, everyone. To continue tonight update from PWSA, Barry King and I are going to provide a brief update about the status of the microfiltration plant in Highland Park. This facility is also known as the MFP. My name is Rebecca Zito. I'm the Senior Manager of Public Affairs for the Pittsburgh Water and Sewer Authority, and Barry King is our Director of Engineering and Construction. So I'm going to take us through a brief presentation to provide context and background about the facility, and Barry will answer any questions and fill in any of the technical details that I am not going to cover. So the microfiltration plant, it was first constructed and brought online in 2002, and it provides a secondary layer of treatment for water stored in the open Highland 1 reservoir before it enters the distribution system. And this secondary layer of treatment is necessary to ensure that water being distributed to customers from the open reservoir meets all drinking water regulations and requirements. So next slide, please. So when the microfiltration plant was brought online in 2002, it was constructed because the Highland 1 reservoir remained open. So regulatory requirements prohibit the use of an open reservoir for drinking water storage, requiring the full treatment of water leaving the Highland 1 reservoir. So even though water is fully treated at the Aspinwall treatment plant just a few miles down the road, once it enters the Highland 1 reservoir, it then needs to be retreated again because it's not considered potable water. And the retreatment of the water going through the microfiltration plants makes it available for customers to use and consume as they normally would. The Highland 1 distribution system also at the time lacked the sufficient backup systems and resiliency. And so the MFP was a necessary facility within our water system. So next slide. And there have been a few notable events related to the history of this facility. Again, in 2002, we were granted the operating permit for the retreatment of water from the open Highland 1 reservoir. Fast forward to January of 2017, there was a very large boil watery advisory that impacted numerous customers. And this is the event that led the DEP to direct the Pittsburgh Water and Sewer Authority by way of an administrative order to either restore the MFP with UV disinfection and the treatment with sodium hypochlorite, or to cover the Highland 1 reservoir. And so we opted to restore the MFP, and incorporate the higher level of treatment. This project was completed in June of 2020, and the MFP was restored to operation in December of that year. After completing its restoration, we later learned that when the Brecken pump station goes offline, treatment and monitoring systems within the MFP are not able to be maintained in accordance with regulatory requirements. So this results in the MFP being unable to function properly during low or no pressure events. And so as a result, the MFP is no longer supplying water from the Highland 1 reservoir into the distribution system. That operation was stopped in August of 2022. Next slide, Maura. There have been significant changes since the MFP was restored. We have completed several projects that have added greater resiliency and redundancy to our system. So our system is much stronger, and we are adding and constructing the necessary backup systems. And some of these projects include liner and cover replacements that have occurred at the Highland 2 reservoir, as well as the Heron Hill and the Lanford reservoirs. We are also rehabilitating or replacing miles of pipe throughout the system. So we have removed aging water lines and are improving the reliability of our distribution system. There have been several pumping enhancements. Godwin diesel pumps have been installed at the Brecken pump station, and we have temporary pumping facilities on Mellon Terrace and near the old pump station off of Negley Avenue. And although these are temporary, they are providing the needed pumping to maintain pressure and keep water flowing through the system. There have also been power improvements which ensure greater reliability throughout the system. And one other thing to note related is that we have noticed that demand within the Highland 1 service area has also decreased, which is resulting in a limited need for the supplemental treatment and supply from the MFP. The reduction in the amount of water needed, as well as the improvements throughout the system, also support the discontinued use of the MFP. And so we are continuing to maintain the facility to bring it back online if necessary, but it has not provided supplemental treatment since August of 2022. Next slide. There is also a lot of regulatory direction behind what happens to the MFP. In September of 19, that's when this conversation first started. The Pennsylvania Department of Environmental Protection is providing the direction under what happens to the MFP. And so this is an active part of our discussions as we move forward with the water reliability plan projects and implementations of an amended consent order agreement. Before we can receive the operating permits for the Highland Reservoir pump station, which Maura just spoke about, as well as the Clearwell bypass, we will have to have the MFP offline. The addition of the Highland Reservoir pump station and the completion of the remaining water reliability plan projects, these will essentially change how water enters the distribution system after it leaves the Brecken pump station. So the MFP will no longer be needed to supply water into the distribution system. Additionally, the PUC looks at this with through an entirely different lens. They're coming at it from a financial perspective and what makes the most sense for the use of ratepayer dollars. So they believe that we can put the financial resources that it takes to maintain and operate the MFP towards other projects that will have greater benefit throughout our entire system. And additionally, there are limitations to what the facility can do. We have learned that power outages occurring at the Brecken pump station demonstrate that the MFP cannot operate during low or no pressure events. This has been shown just as recently as 2023, when there were significant service interruptions, and many residents within the Highland Park neighborhood experienced experienced those service interruptions, and so would know firsthand what that involves. The next slide. So by taking the MFP offline, there are many benefits that we will realize. We are maintaining water quality throughout the system with it being offline. This primarily pertains to the use of orthophosphate. When the MFP is active, flow monitors will show that immediate changes, will show immediate changes and have previously caused disruptions to the ortho feed. So by removing the MFP from the equation, we are seeing consistent levels of orthophosphate being added, and our state mandated testing is verifying low lead levels with that removed. There are also significant operating cost reductions. We estimate that we would be able to save approximately $1 million per year by deactivating the MFP. This includes power costs and costs associated with chemicals. We also anticipate that there will be employee labor savings because we will not have to put those resources towards the ongoing maintenance of the facility. There would be a reduction in water loss. Right now, water is sitting in the Highland 1 reservoir, so we are draining any excess water, and it's also being lost to evaporation. And this is just not a responsible use of a public asset. We would be able to eliminate employee safety risks. The MFP facility requires the use of numerous chemicals. There are mechanical and electrical systems. So by deactivating the MFP, we'll be able to reduce that work and reduce the potential safety concerns. And then there will be reduction in permitting and regulatory requirements with the facility offline. Next slide. So in summary, to move forward with the PWSA's water reliability plan, the MFP will need to be removed from service. And in its current state, the facility is providing no water production or water quality benefit. The building itself and the Highland 1 reservoir will still remain in use for the specific purpose of distribution system monitoring and hydraulic control. PWSA will also continue to maintain both of these facilities. Again, there will be the operational cost savings. We're estimating $1 million per year we would be able to save by taking the facility offline. And then with the reduction in water loss, we would save approximately 2.5 million gallons per day. In the immediate future, there will be no visible changes for park users. Although it's offline, the building will remain. The systems within the tower portion of the facility, they provide the hydraulic relief and pressure control. And then we would anticipate that there's an opportunity for long-term visioning for a future use. So that concludes this presentation, and we're happy to turn this over to any questions at this time.
Thank you so much, Maura and Rebecca. I have an immediate question about that presentation. It wasn't 100% clear to me what happens to the reservoir, because you said that one of the benefits was less water loss due to evaporation, but then it sounded like you were saying that the reservoir would still have water in it, and so just not sure what you meant.
Yeah, so at this time, the open reservoir will still remain as it is. We do need to spend some time thinking about additional storage, an additional storage space. That is something that will come further down the road. So we still have a few years to determine what the next use for the open reservoir would be. In the immediate future, it will still remain in place. We would still maintain water within the reservoir. Just the water from the reservoir right now is not being distributed into the system.
Right, because I mean, as you know, that's a huge amenity for the park, and that's sort of having that water feature there. was sort of drove building the microfiltration plant, right? Because the community and the city didn't want to have it covered. So, go ahead, jump on in if you have a question.
Yeah, what's gonna happen, or is there a plan for the space for the current pumping station after it's demolished? As to how it will be used?
That might be a question for Barry. Can you
So-
just describe like what it'll look like when it's yeah, what that space is gonna be?
Okay, so I'm assuming you're referring to what we've either call the Highland Pump Station as it exists now, or the station that's on site that's used to pump into the Garfield system. Once that's removed, we intend on doing landscaping that will disguise to a certain extent the pump station, and will allow for a much more attractive view from the roadway and the adjacent properties, looking towards the reservoir or our pump station.
And will you involve any organizations like Tree Pittsburgh in that landscaping plan?
So our plans have gone through the review of the Art Commission for the public space. And so we have had commentary back, as well as Forestry has provided some input with regards to that plan as well.
Thank you.
I have a question that I think is maybe
Yes,
the same as
Go ahead.
Stephanie's question. Not being a water engineer in any sense, are you guys saying that for the next couple of years, the open reservoir nothing will change, but you're considering draining it? No.
So just to be clear, during this period of time, while we'll have the MFP offline, but we're going to be constructing the Highland Reservoir Pump Station, our new facility that we just discussed earlier. The reservoir will remain in place and will still be utilized for any excess water that gets pumped into the system. I'll try not to get too technical, but right now, water is pumped from the Brecken pump station down on Washington Boulevard, and they're constant feed pumps. So with the variable use of water within the Highland One system, excess water in that hydraulic control structure overtops and goes into the reservoir. That's the way it's performed since 2002 when it went online and that hydraulic control structure was completed. And it will continue to do that all the way up until we have the completion of the Highland Pump Station, and then beyond. We'll still need, when the pumping system is on, that ability to relieve pressure of the water until such point, and that was what Rebecca was referencing. We're intending on having a new tank, a covered tank, nowhere necessarily in the visible public view, but it will allow us to provide storage of the water without having to retreat it, and it will allow us this pressure relief without having to utilize the reservoir. So at that point, the reservoir will become a largely public amenity for the park and its original intended desire, which was to have, what was viewed as a very attractive water body for the Highland residents in that area.
Thank you for
Not
clarifying.
really just for the Highland Park residents in this area, right?
The city of
Right,
Pittsburgh.
it goes
You have a
on
good point.
further than that, right?
That is absolutely true.
Thank you.
Is it,
So what about the water that comes down through Hess Road?
You're referencing the stormwater?
Yes.
Okay. That is a different scenario. We do have
Yeah,
projects
it
that are
is.
looking and we do have projects that are looking at the stormwater opportunities where we can derive improvement throughout the city, and that is one that is being looked at as well. So, but that's a completely different portion of the engineering wing.
It is, but it's part of it, I think. No?
So it does need to be addressed, but it's not part of this project. That's
I
all.
think we need to say, keep our questions to the pump station project and the microfiltration plant.
Yeah.
Does anyone else have questions?
Yeah,
Glenn,
what, what led to
David, and then Glenn.
what led to the delightful change that allows dogs to walk up on the reservoir? It used to be verboten. Now it's permitted. Like the signs up there show that used to be no dogs but anything else, and the signs that are up there now show nothing else except dogs are permitted, it seems. Who made that change?
What are you talking about, Glenn?
I
Was it?
don't think this is a PWSA question, but I can answer the question. Do you want to finish up, wrap up with PWSA, and then I can talk about that.
I have first of all, I'd like to congratulate everybody that's been working on this project for so many years and the presentation tonight. I've lived in Highland Park since 1980. And so the reservoir has been something that's been batted around and debated and everything. And I don't know if David Hance is on tonight, but if he, David is probably the guy who, no pun intended, walked on water to get that thing built and got the thing up and running. And I find it very interesting that there was just one event. There was one boil watered event. I think it was in 2019 that caused Pennsylvania PUC to claim that we weren't doing the water processing correctly. Am I correct in that? That one presentation, you kind of went through that pretty quickly. Could you explain what that one event was and what was the rationale behind that in a little more detail to bring it offline?
Yes, I can explain that. So back in, are you talking about the January 31st, 2017 event?
Well, is that the one that was that triggered it to be a boil water advisory? I think that
yes. So
triggered
the initial boil water advisory really boils down to an event where there were, there's opinions that the state DEP had versus what the PWSA had, but it all boils down to pun not intended. Yeah, sorry about that. There was documentation that indicated that there were zero chlorination readings on 2 days over a weekend. We know and believe sincerely that that was an error by a technician and not a true result. But according to the state, with you having those registered in the system, and the fact that there were regulations that were adopted after the initial 2000, it started back in 1999 and went into 2000, the regulations that you had to cover all the reservoirs. And this was throughout the United States. It was an EPA regulation.
Right.
But so the real crux after that became a focus on both the Giardia and the Cryptosporidium inactivation. And unless you have a clear well that allows a certain duration of time for chlorine to contact, it deactivates it, it kills the potential of Cryptosporidium or Giardia in the water. If you don't have sufficient contact time, and clearly with the Highland 1 reservoir, even with the MFP treatment, the membranes are only rated down to a certain level of treatment and removal, and Giardia still has a theoretical potential to pass through a membrane. And so when you have zero chlorination readings and you had water being dosed through the membranes and there's a potential for Giardia, that was the reason the state declared there is a potential for PWSA at that time to dose water that had potentially either Giardia or Cryptosporidium in it. And as such, they said until you could either cover the reservoir and eliminate the potential for Giardia and Cryptosporidium, or you provide sufficient treatment, and that was the pathway we went. UV treatment does deactivate the Giardia. And so when we added that to the system, it took care of their concerns with regards to
that was the purpose of the filtration facility, right?
Correct.
But you say there was a membrane within that design that did not allow for the final filtration of all of the bacteria?
Yeah, if you don't have the chlorination of a sufficient level and a sufficient duration, and that's where the clear well comes into play at the Aspinwall Water Treatment Plant. We don't have a clear well at Highland 1 because there's no room to have an actual clear well after you treat it and after you chlorinate. So when the membranes, when you had the residual of zero chlorination there, technically there could be a passage. It's a theoretical. We don't believe that was the case, but there's no way to fight a double negative argument there.
So the technician that allowed that to happen, that one little slip up has caused all of this, relooking at all of this, and ultimately taking that facility offline. Is that correct? Is that how simply it happened?
Basically, yes.
Basically, okay. So all the planning that David Hance did for that and all the community meetings and things like that are now sort of water over the dam, so to say. Another pun.
Yes.
So where are we now? Where is the future of that building going to be, and what are the impacts going to be to the park? I'm talking like 10 years out.
So that still remains to be seen. It's going to likely be a public facility. We still need to utilize up until we do provide a tank to be able to relieve the pressure within the system So until that point, and it's not in our plans, capital plans, until at least 10 years out from now. So you're going to see that still utilized as a water function for the next roughly 10 years. But after that point, it will be up to the city, and we will probably have public forums to try to ascribe what will be the future of that facility. But we don't have the plans of demolishing it or taking it down. It will serve some function.
Yeah, it's a very nice building. It's a beautiful building.
It is.
It's a very park-like building.
Amazing architecture.
I thank you very much for your comments and your questions.
Just as part of a beautiful building, the public restrooms that are in the back of the reservoir, are they not the responsibility of Pittsburgh Water and Sewer?
That is correct. Those are technically Department of Public Work facilities that are up there.
Does anybody know if the city is aware of all of the bad things that are going on in that roof? The temporary.
Well, they put a tarp on it and blown off, and the roof is falling apart. So
the building is falling apart.
Yeah, the building is falling apart. That is not your responsibility.
It is not, but what I'll do is take your discussion. We meet every month with DPW and go over items throughout the city that we overlap. So that is one discussion I can have with them.
Thank you.
That's very appreciated. Thank you very much.
And
Absolutely.
May I just ask also, so the Reservoir 1 is going to continue to be not operated, but maintained by you. Does that mean that you will be churning the water so it doesn't become stagnant and algae doesn't form on it? Is that correct?
So we'll be responsible for ensuring that the level is maintained and the aesthetics of it up to the point of, as it's not getting overgrown with algae, it's not becoming a nuisance. We'll be addressing that for the next 10 years.
Thank you.
And any other questions? I have a question about the Rising Main project. So where the Rising Main was put in parallel to Bunker Hill, on either end there is now a brown vent, sort of like a giant candy cane shaped vent. Do you know what I'm referring to? They're like 5 feet tall, brown PVC that come up out of the ground with a hook on the top.
Are they in the median, the grassy area?
They're in the grassy area adjacent to the pathway.
Barry, I would assume that has to do with the sewer work that we did.
It looks like it's a vent.
Right. Well, either way, I don't remember those being discussed in any of our meetings. And you mentioned the Historic Commission. I know that they would not approve of things like that because they are quite the eyesore, and we're just sort of wondering if there's a plan to either change them or camouflage them, put plantings in around them. or something?
So I will take that inquiry back and determine if, and we can, at a future meeting, Maura or our team would be able to give you an update if there's any clarifications, any change, what the disposition of those will ultimately be.
Great,
Yeah, I'll
thank
send
you.
you an email update when we'll look into that.
Great. If you guys can send me copies of your presentation, we'll post them on our website for folks that weren't able to join or people that want to go back. All right, last call for questions.
May I ask one more question, Stephanie?
Sure, go ahead, Nancy.
And I don't know if again, this comes under your purview, but at the entrance along Bunker Hill Street and also on Bunker Hill Street, there are 2 fire hydrants, and both of them are now covered and have been covered since the pipe has been installed. Is that, do we not have a fire hydrant for our home, which is two doors away? I don't know why they're covered, and is that something that's part of your project, or does that have to do with somehow the city?
So that
They're plasticed over.
Actually, I can do a little clearing up on that. The one that's on the top of Bunker Hill at the intersection with Highland Park, the one on the right, if you're at that intersection, has been removed. There's been one on the other side that's a new one that's still out of service. It's wrapped in black plastic. And I think it's something that needs to be looked into, because I'm not so sure if there's a serviceable fire hydrant on the north part of Highland Avenue or Bunker Hill Street.
And thank you for discussing those. I will definitely get a confirmation. The one that was removed was specific to when the state required us to ensure that we couldn't dose directly into the system with the MFP. We had to remove certain portions of piping, and that one hydrant was related to that piping. And so we did isolate and take spool pieces out to meet the state mandate. But the other one, I'll get confirmation of that, and I will work with operations to see if A, if it's going to be removed, but B, we're going to put another one back. So I will get back to you on that as well.
Thank you.
Thank you.
And I just realized we had a comment in a question in the comments. It's from Dick. He said he's seen a number of crews doing repairs on the street mains and is wondering if they're in good shape or they generally need renewal. Dick, is there anything else you want to add to that, or?
No, I've just been walking around, and I think the last 2 or 3 months I've seen 3 or 4 or 5 street crews with digging big holes and making repairs. And so I was just wondering whether part of this overall renewal of the system needs to actually include the street mains, or this is just happenstance that I've seen so much work lately.
So I think you're seeing an overlap of some of our capital work. There is additional work going on out there to line the sewers. And so a lot of that work does involve opening up a fairly significant entry point to either make a point repair or the points to which we actually insert the liner and for correcting the sewer. So it may be a portion of that. We're also within your area doing lead service line, some of the completion of the lead service line replacements and water mains. Maura, do you know if there's anything other specific you might think it is?
Yeah, some of you remember we did have some overlapping lining work and water main work, kind of more towards East Liberty. We also were doing just some straight lead service line replacement work. Probably, I think we're pretty much wrapped up, and it was mostly in East Liberty, but a bit into Highland Park as well. So that's probably the most recent capital investment that you would have seen, is that lead service line replacement. But I can certainly look into it and see. We did do a lot of upgrades to the kind of distribution system in Highland Park last year. But just for general context, our designers are always keeping track of the data we keep on water main breaks, leaks that we have to go out to. So when we do see pipes that are giving us problems consistently, we look at the record, we see it's a very old pipe. We do kind of put it on our short list for potential replacement in the coming years. So generally speaking, we're always keeping an eye on those problem water mains and sewer mains, and considering them for full replacement. But I can look into just kind of our recent work to see why there's been a smattering of crews you've been seeing out there.
Great, thank you, Maura.
Okay, thank you.
All right. Any last questions?
I have one more question. There was a mention that the plans for the landscaping work around the new upper pump house have already been approved and everything. Is it possible for you to share those plans with the community? I'm sure we talked about it in the past, but just there's some discussion about the trails and access to Heth's Run. And I know some people who use Heth's Run come up near that pump house. And so I think it would behoove us to think holistically about the landscaping that's being done there in tandem with conversations about Heth's Run.
Yeah, we can have that discussion, certainly.
Great, thank you.
All right, Maura, Rebecca, and Barry, thank you so much for coming tonight. It's always great to have you. There's never any shortage of things to talk about.
Thank you.
Thank you.
And I think that's it. So thanks to everyone for coming.
I'm happy to answer the question about the dogs at the reservoir.
Oh, right.
Right, so as it turns out, there was never any regulation about dogs at the reservoir. And nobody from the city apparently knows who put up those signs originally, and nobody claimed responsibility. The city did not claim responsibility. PWSA did not claim responsibility. When there was an incident with someone with a accessibility animal at the reservoir being stopped and asked, that generated conversation on the mailing list, the HP listserv, and that resulted in a conversation about those signs. And it was realized that those signs are there, but nobody would take responsibility for them, and they were not in concordance with actual park regulation. So what happened is the city took those signs down and put up accurate signs that do reflect actual rules about what is allowed up at the reservoir, which means that the sign does say you can have dogs because that is the actual regulation.
And just a point of clarification, I had mentioned earlier, we're hoping to have a meeting with the CDC on February 29th. We're still confirming that date. So there's a chance it might move, but we're aiming for the February 29th, and we'll post to the listserv and to our website once we have it pinned down. So thank you all for coming. Stay warm and stay safe.